The defender of creation, Don Lorenzo, goes one-on-one against every shooting star in Blue Lock, against each and every striker we've seen as of yet. And of course, a video like this would not be possible without setting up some rules, and so here goes. First of all, everything goes. Every striker will be in this video. This obviously includes the pros, which, as crazy as it might seem, you have to trust me with this one, guys, because there is actually a rationality to the chaos. And by the end of this video, you will see that winning against the pros is not really the end goal, but rather I want to explore how playing styles would do against one another. Next, players who are no longer strikers like Aryu, Karasu and Hiyori are obviously excluded, with one exception being Sai Itoshi. I feel he is such a force that it would be a shame not to include him, since he is a new Gen 11 much like Lorenzo. And also, since Bunny is included, I feel like Sai is a mandatory inclusion. Next rule, the assessment will be purely one-on-one, which I know it's kinda unfair for the talented learners because one-on-one interactions tend to favor the geniuses, unlike talented learners who excel while utilizing other players. However, if we were to assess who is overall better, this video would extend to the heat death of the universe, especially since Lorenzo isn't just a great defender but also he is great at being a midfielder. And so going overall who would be better against every striker would really extend this video beyond what I would like it to be. And even though it might seem a little bit unfair for the talented learners, it will be purely one-on-one. But finally, and this is a rule for you guys, I want you to tell me guys before even watching the video who will be able to beat the Dawn, but I want you to back your answers by stating why. However, with all of that out of the way, let's dig right in. Beginning with the U20 players, since I think leaving the pros for last is more fun. And for the sake of having a roadmap, we are going to start from the bottom of the 23 players list and work our way up towards Rin and Isagi. From there we can talk about Nagi, the new Gen 11, and the other strikers that we've seen that aren't really part of Blue Lock, but I feel like we really need to talk about them. And starting up straight, we have everyone's favorite striker, Sendo. I mean, what do you expect me to tell you here, guys? Lorenzo completely destroys Sendo. If Nico is able to completely neutralize Sendo, then Lorenzo would simply destroy him beyond recognition. And so, moving right up to the next striker, who is Yukimiya Kenyu. Now, the case with Yuki is actually far more interesting than Sendo. You see, unlike him who had no weapon, Yuki actually presents three amazing weapons: his shooting ability, his speed, and of course his dribbling ability. And so let's look at it. First of all, let's talk about his speed. While definitely would be Yuki's best option against Lorenzo, I think the fact that Yuki is relative to Kaiser should tell you everything about how this will go. Because if Kaiser with his insane perception and his amazing off-the-ball movements, coupled with that speed, cannot escape Lorenzo, then Yuki simply has no chance. And so what you might think he should do is actually go head-on against Lorenzo and try to dribble past him. And for that, it's going to be a massacre. Lorenzo is by far the best dueler on defense. Not a singular player was able to dribble past him. And for Yuki, we actually saw him in chapter 225 go against Lorenzo, who by the way was still keeping Kaiser on a short leash. However, Yuki there chose not to engage Lorenzo. And obviously Isagi played a huge role in this, because now Yuki understands that picking a losing fight would simply cost him his position, and so he chose Isagi. However, that's exactly the argument for why Yuki loses here miserably. And finally, when it comes to his shooting, I mean, sure, his shot is a bit unpredictable, but if Lorenzo is on him, I highly doubt he could even shoot in the first place. And even still, with his predator eyes, he's no match for Kaiser, who Lorenzo shut off multiple times. And so this is another easy W for Lorenzo. Next, we have Otoya, who's actually one of the strikers that really grew on me a lot lately. However, his weapon of slipping by gets completely countered by Lorenzo's second most oppressive weapon on defense, which is his perception. You see, Lorenzo is obviously amazing at dueling, we got that from his fight against Yuki, but also he has an insane perception to keep up with Kaiser's insane off-the-ball movements, which I know it's different with Otoya since he likes slipping, but I highly doubt that Lorenzo's perception that could keep Kaiser on a leash cannot keep Otoya. And so the W goes for Lorenzo here. Next we have Kunigami, and I think he will be the first player to actually give Lorenzo his first L. Now I gotta say, it's not Kunigami's raw power and strength that would actually give him the W, because Lorenzo's weird body is kinda hard to engage. I mean, Kaza for example is insane at this. He is able to hold both Karasu and Tokimitsu, two of the best at engaging players physically. Yet the same Kaza failed miserably against Lorenzo should tell you everything about how raw power against Lorenzo isn't really enough. Despite how skinny he might seem, it's not easy to shove him off and force your way through. Unless of course you are absurd at physicality, which as we learned from the World 5, the U20 players, despite the difference between them, aren't really that strong. And so what I think the weapon that actually enables Kunigami to win is his aerial mobility. Lorenzo's weakness is without a doubt the aerial territories. That's the reason why Snuffy puts both Ario and Aiko, the two best players in the air, next to him. Lorenzo might have an iron grip on the ground, he fails miserably in the air. And so if Kunigami keeps the fight in the air, this is honestly a miserable loss to the Dawn. And honestly, it shows the dynamics here. It shows that certain playing styles against other playing styles, and that's definitely one of the best things about Blue Lock. However, moving on to the next striker, Chigiri Hiyoma. Now, the case for Chigiri is actually very curious. You see, dribbling wise and forcing his way through, I think Chigiri would lose miserably against Lorenzo. Despite him having 93 in dribbling, I don't think he could beat the Dawn one-on-one. The guy simply has the best dueling ability in the U20 category. And so what I think would give Chigiri a fighting chance is actually his speed when utilized away from Lorenzo. For example, if he receives a faraway pass, that Chigiri could simply outrun Lorenzo, or as we've seen him do, pass the ball to himself far away. And I think because Lorenzo cannot rely on his teammates to stop Chigiri once he starts sprinting, this fight really flames on. And honestly, I am leaning towards it being a draw, because while Chigiri has the ball, he has no way of dealing with Lorenzo. But at the same time, if the latter starts sprinting, there is simply no way for Lorenzo to deal with his speed, and so it is a draw. Next we have Bachira Meguru, and honestly this one is a bit weird. While I truly believe Bachira is the best dribbler we've seen in the Neo Egoist League excluding the pros, he wasn't that impressive to be honest. I mean, for sure Chigiri's dribbling and performance against Bastard was definitely better than Bachira's. However, what I think Bachira excels at is actually dribbling while leading the team towards scoring a goal, which I don't know if that was something that was taught to him by Lavinio or something that he simply came up with. However, where I am going with this is that there is no way for Bachira's dribbling to actually be better than Lorenzo's dueling, especially because Lorenzo is so wobbly and Bachira would not know how to use his body or momentum against him. And so this is an easy W for Lorenzo. Next we have Baro Shoei. Now on paper, Lorenzo should defeat Baro without a doubt. I mean, as we spoke of in the Kunigami section, physicality isn't that great against Lorenzo. Unless of course it is absurd, I don't think it is enough to beat Lorenzo. And so Baro simply can't force his way through. Then his Predator Eyes get countered completely by Lorenzo's agility. If he can stop the Kaiser impact, he definitely would stop Baro's shot. And finally, if Bachira and Yuki fail against Lorenzo when it comes to dribbling, there is no way in hell for Baro to actually do anything. Except for one point, which is Baro's unpredictability. You see, Baro excels at finding solutions to unsolvable situations. I mean, that's his whole gimmick. And so, if there is any way for Baro to defeat Lorenzo, it definitely would be through his unpredictability, especially when coupled with his lightning chop dribbles. If Lorenzo is not careful with his signature jumps, Baro could definitely take him by surprise and score. However, we've seen Kaiser try everything, yet it was to no avail. And so, for that reason, I am leaning towards giving it to Lorenzo, especially because Baro's unpredictability works better when he is in a team setting. However, in a purely one-on-one, and despite Baro being my favorite player, I think he loses to Lorenzo here. However, next is none other than the Dragon Shido Ryusei. And honestly, the case is kinda like Kunigami. I feel like Shido's off-the-ball movements or his instinctive plays would get easily countered by Lorenzo's perception. However, if Shido takes the fight in the air, there is no way for Lorenzo to beat him. And so this is yet another loss to the Dawn. However, next we have the Destroyer, Rin Itoshi. And I mean, I already made a video about Rin versus Lorenzo, and in that video I actually said that Rin specifically gets countered hardly by Lorenzo. Almost every weapon Lorenzo has is the exact counter to Rin's weapons. For example, his destructive dribbling would get countered easily by Lorenzo's agility. The fact that Kaiser can take Rin on a ride due to his agility means that Lorenzo would completely counter Rin. Crashing into someone who is as wobbly as Lorenzo is not really a great idea. As for his shooting, again, if he can stop the Kaiser impact, I have no doubt he can stop Rin or Baru. And so despite Rin being one of the most oppressive players, I think he gets countered hard in this matchup, and the W goes for Lorenzo. Kinda the opposite of the matchup against Kunigami and Shido. However, with that we reach the best striker in Blue Lock, Isagi Yoichi. Now, to be honest, Kaiser and Isagi are always on the same playing field when it comes to their off-the-ball movements and vision. And so, I definitely think if Lorenzo can pocket Kaiser that way, he can definitely do the same to Isagi. Especially because Isagi's strongest point, which is his adaptability, wouldn't really work here. Usually, Isagi adapts by relation to the whole field. And unfortunately, this one-on-one setting kinda goes against a talented learner such as Isagi. However, there is a saving grace for Yoichi, which is the fastest piece. Isagi was able to beat Rin, Shido, and Kaiser, all three players with insane perception. And so, if there is any way for Isagi to beat Lorenzo, it's definitely through the fastest piece. However, I gotta say that Lorenzo's agility and his lunges might actually present a problem for Isagi. And so, to be safe, I am going to give the W for Lorenzo. However, note that the fastest piece actually gives a really high chance for Isagi to beat the Dawn. However, with that we are done with Blue Lock. And next, let's talk about the other random strikers here and there before we move to the new Gen 11s. First, let's talk about Agi, which is a definite loss for Lorenzo. For the same reason as Shido and Kunigami, and because this is a one-on-one, Lorenzo definitely gets countered by Agi's high-flying capabilities. However, next, let's move to Lara, the striker of FC Barca. Now, I think he will get the same treatment as Sendo. With no apparent weapons, his cheeks would get clapped up really hard by Lorenzo, and so this is an easy W for him. Next, let's talk about some strikers that we've seen but got eliminated. Mainly, I want to talk about Kirari Yosuke here. Now, we don't have much information about him, but by the looks of it, he seems to be a dribbler or someone like Yuki maybe, and for that reason, I think he gets clapped up by Lorenzo no issue, especially because he failed very early in Blue Lock and he did not get to witness this really high level, and so it is pretty safe to assume he gets clapped up. However, now is the time for us to talk about everyone's favorite lazy genius, Nagi Seishiro. Now, to be honest, it's a bit weird with Nagi. If we talk about current Nagi, this unmotivated Nagi, he definitely lost to Lorenzo and we've seen it. However, a motivated Nagi actually hard counters Lorenzo. Lorenzo's lunges and his weakness in the air would really give Nagi the edge here. And I mean, sure, Lorenzo's perception might allow him to do what Rin was doing against Nagi. By staying at a safe distance and lunging at the final moment, he could definitely take Nagi by surprise. However, much like it happened to Rin, much like it happened to Isagi and Kaiser, Nagi is simply crazy, and so he would definitely wreck Lorenzo. However, and this is a big one, it is contingent on him actually being motivated. And so for now the W goes for Lorenzo, but if Nagi gets his flame back, I definitely think he beats Lorenzo. However, with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the new Gen 11, starting up straight with Kaiser. Now, to be honest, Kaiser lost miserably to Lorenzo, and so it is an easy W for the Dawn, right? Well, no, Kaiser attained a new level in the PXG game. However, I gotta say this, his new playing style actually embraces his talented learner nature more than anything. And so, other than the Magnus technique, it really wouldn't help him in a one-on-one fight against Lorenzo. As we've seen, almost every weapon he has gets countered completely by the Dawn. And so the case stands, it is a W for Lorenzo. But next, moving on to Sai Itoshi. Now, much like Kaiser, Sai is a talented learner. However, he actually has one of the deadliest dribbling abilities we've seen as of yet, which, by the way, it is reactive dribbling. And there lies the key to this duel. You see, reactive dribbling requires Sai to actually read his opponent before making his move. And in that, I think it is pretty impossible to read Lorenzo due to his wobbly body. And so his dribbling actually gets countered completely. His other weapons, which while being insane, I don't think they help him in one-on-one against Lorenzo. And so once more the W goes for the Dawn. However, in the final battle in the U20 category, Lorenzo versus Bunny. And I gotta say this, if he fails against Kunigami, if he fails against Agi or Shido, Bunny would literally wipe the floor with Lorenzo. Having his playing style revolve around a weapon that completely counters Lorenzo is definitely a death sentence to the Italian Don. And so we are ending the U20 category on a big loss against Bunny. However, and more interestingly, now is the time for us to move to the pros. Which immediately I gotta say this. There are a few pros that I think would wreck Lorenzo beyond recognition. Due to how sheerly destructive and how dominant they are, his playing style would simply not work on them. And they actually fall into three categories. The first of which is the absurdly muscular players, Noah, Prince and Blake. These three are honestly just beyond anything Lorenzo can do or handle. And honestly, they would just destroy him in their wake. Their dueling ability on offense take their extremely bulky build to force a path through. And even though Lorenzo excels in beating strong players and countering their charges, the gap is simply way too big for Lorenzo to handle. And so he would lose miserably. I feel like even with his agility and explosiveness, he would not do much to these pros. And so, unfortunately, they would literally hit him like a truck. And by the way, the case for Noah and Prince, they both are actually so insane at jumping that they could easily take advantage of his weakness. It's not even funny at this point. Which, by the way, leads us straight to the second category of pros that would decimate Lorenzo. This one honestly is the most brutal, which I am calling it a category, but it is actually one player, Dada Silva. It will be the same as Bunny, but on steroids. Simply because not only does he just hard counter him, it is honestly unfair at this point. However, let's talk about the third and final category, which is actually comprised of two strikers, Loki and Snuffy's friend Mick. Now, these players are actually so fast, it's not even funny. Maybe Mick is not on Loki's level, however he was so fast that his speed alone took him to the same level as Snuffy, the best player in the world. And so I honestly feel they would decimate him because I feel like he cannot even react to them. I mean, sure, Lorenzo is a genius and could do it instinctively, but against Loki, good luck, man. And I assume Mick is that deadly as well, and so he gets decimated once more. However, with that out of the way, we reach the more interesting players. And I have actually put them in two categories. The first are geniuses, which are Luna and Levi, and the second is Snuffy and Cavazos. First against Luna and Levi, which both seem to excel at dribbling. Lorenzo might actually have a very high chance against them, simply because his perception and dueling ability is that high. I honestly don't think he could stop neither, and the W definitely goes for them. However, I think Lorenzo has a chance at taking them by surprise and beating them here and there, especially because we are talking one-on-one. Again, don't get this twisted, I am not saying he is on their level or he beats them. I am simply saying that he has a chance against them. Most of the times, however, I definitely see him losing, and so they would be taking the W. But finally, we reach the last category, which is the talented learners, Snuffy and Cavazos. Now, straight up, I don't think Lorenzo would do anything against Snuffy. The guy has black belt in jiu-jitsu, and so he would handle him like a child. I know he is a talented learner and this one-on-one setting kinda favors geniuses, but Snuffy is that oppressive and I really don't think Lorenzo has any chance. Against Cavazos, however, there is actually a chance. You see, the latter's weapons are Metavision and his kicking ability, both weapons that we've seen Lorenzo excel at countering specifically. I know Cavazos is definitely on a whole different level compared to Kaiser. However, much like the case with Levi and Luna, I think Lorenzo has a legit chance against Cavazos, especially if the latter doesn't expect him and shoot the ball recklessly. There, Lorenzo could pull the same thing he did to Kaiser and stop Cavazos' shot. And I know what you might say, Kaiser is a U20 player, how are you comparing him to a pro? Well, you have to remember, when it comes to shooting, Kaiser definitely compares to the pros. He has the fastest swinging shot, which definitely does not mean he has the fastest shot, but it is the hardest to pinpoint when did he shoot. Still, Lorenzo had no issue stopping that. And so, if Kaiser is better than Cavazos in this point, I still think Lorenzo might be able to beat his shots. However, Cavazos is one of the best pros for a reason, and I think he has multiple shooting abilities. And I would think definitely Lorenzo cannot stop them all, and so Cavazos would definitely be the winner here. However, I find it funny that because he counters his playing style, Lorenzo actually has a legit chance at stopping him or beating him. And that's definitely the reason why I wanted to include the pros. It is very interesting to me to see the varying matchups between players and between playing styles. However, that's the list for you guys. I really hope you enjoyed it, and please let me know what do you think about this whole idea. And would you be interested in actually a striker versus every defender or midfielder we've seen? However, with that, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, thank you for watching.